While this movie has been released in other parts of the world already, Netflix just released this in the US under their banner. Out of My League is an Italian rom-com that could remind you of other movies, because it did with me. But should you check it out anyway? Tired of swiping through the dating scene with her besties in tow, a charming yet awkward woman with a rare genetic disorder sets her sights on love. So if you care about Munchies, stick around to the very end as I've got a couple of new ones to tell you about. Marta is a young woman with two really great friends. She's been orphaned from a really young age, so Jacopo and Federica are like her family. They move in together, and in an effort to get Marta out into the world, they take her to a party, and there she sees this guy that she's instantly attracted to, but he's suave and rich, completely the opposite of her awkward self. Now, the beginning of this movie is a little rough. It does do a good job of setting the stage for the characters and all that's going on, but it wasn't a smooth start. As the story goes along and finds its stride in the romantic comedy realm, it begins to work well, and it pulls in some heartfelt emotion. Because Marta has a genetic disorder and is pretty sickly, her character and the premise of the movie do bring other films to mind. This reminds me of a few different movies in small parts. There's Me Before You, The Fault in Our Stars, 5 Feet Apart, and even The Big Sick. Now, this doesn't copy those, but there are the similarities. And another movie that this has similarities to is the comedy She's Out of My League. And while that one doesn't feature sickness, it does focus on a character who doesn't believe that they're good enough or deserving enough of a relationship with someone that they deem to be of higher worth. Now, I like Marta. She's awkward and quirky, but she's also genuine. Her looming health problems help to give her an urgency to do the things she wants, but also the strength to not beat around the bush. She becomes assertive in her life. And while we don't see a ton of her best friends throughout the film, when we do see them, they're supportive, loyal, and caring. They're very empathetic to Marta and then become characters we can also root for. And they have their own minor storyline going on, and surprisingly, it's not a distraction. It works to support the greater story, but not in an overly obvious way. The focus of Marta's affections is Arturo. At first, he's not very likable. He comes across as arrogant, dismissive, and even entitled. And I like the growth that we see in him. It is predictable, like with most rom-coms, but it still works really well. And along with Arturo's character predictability, the whole story is fairly obvious. And that didn't bother me in this. It shares the same formula as most rom-coms and even similar premises. I was still engaged in the characters, and their love story drew me in and then made me care for them, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. Now, the comedy is uneven. Sometimes there are very funny parts where the jokes work amazingly well, and other times they just fell flat for me and they didn't have the intended effect. But even when that happened, the story still retained a sweetness to it, so if the jokes didn't cause me to chuckle or even laugh, at least I was still invested in the characters. I think there were more opportunities to create more development in Arturo. His family situation is a bit underdeveloped, but thankfully it's not a complete mystery. There are some short scenes that let us into his background, even if it's only slightly, so we can understand some of his motivations. Now, I enjoyed the soundtrack in this. It's a mix of Italian and English songs, and they mostly had an upbeat pop sound to them. The movie's only 91 minutes long, so it doesn't outstay its welcome at all. There are some sequences that are made into montages to help move time along faster, which keeps it right into that perfect length for a romantic comedy. Many of the scenes are quick, but they didn't feel slapped together. There just wasn't a lot of fluff that was included to make them go on longer than necessary. I also don't think it was rushed, and we can see where the story is headed, but with that, I do think the ending came on a little abruptly. That end wasn't immediately satisfying for me. It took me about 5 minutes after the end to appreciate how they chose to wrap up the story. There's resolution without resolving everything, and that might sound like it is a frustrating way to end, but actually, it's a much better way to conclude than some of the alternatives. The end is touching, and it fits within the narrative and flow that had already been established, so we aren't cheated out of story and still get to have some good emotion. Overall, this is an enjoyable romantic comedy. Even though we've seen many of the story elements before, the characters are charismatic and they're fun. They convincingly convey the romantic attraction and are also able to bring subtle comedy to their performances. And while the ending may feel like it comes on a bit too quickly, the conclusion is satisfying and it's ultimately a great way to end. There's sex, nudity, some profanity, and no violence. I give Out of My League 3.5 out of 5 couches. Okay, so I've got two Munchies to tell you about, even though they're kind of the same thing. I've got birthday cake Oreos and dark chocolate Oreos. So let's just start with the birthday cake ones, okay? Now, I'm gonna pull this up here. The cream does have that cakey taste that you think of when you hear something is birthday cake flavored. It's not a strong flavor though. It's actually a pretty subtle addition. And at first I taste the regular Oreo cream, and then it comes on with more of that cakey taste. And I don't think you can see it, but there are sprinkles in here that they're pretty unnoticeable. I think they're made for more decoration, and they're so fine that I can't even feel them when I'm biting into the cookie. Now next up are the dark chocolate cream ones. Now these are much less sweet than other Oreos. The cream is richer and it almost tastes like the whole thing is the chocolate cookie rather than having the cream in the middle. And you can kind of see it here. I mean, it's dark, but you can tell the cream is there because it does add softness to the bite rather than just eating two of the chocolate pieces. Now normally I don't like the cookies by themselves. If I make a double stuff, you know where you take apart two double stuffed cookies and you smash them together, well you're left with two extra cookie parts. I throw those away because I'm not really a fan of that portion of the, just the snack. That being said though, it does make these dark chocolate ones a bit of a conundrum for me. They're okay. I mean, I certainly don't hate them, but I'm not sure how much I really like them. They're definitely not bad enough for me to toss, so I am going to continue to munch on them, and maybe I'll get more enjoyment from them the more I eat. Do you like Oreos? Do you have a favorite store-bought cookie? Let me know what you gravitate to in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me. And as I reach for this, I'm going to see this nasty cookie there. Going to take this, smash it with the chocolate. And that's probably not going to be very good, but tastes like Oreo.